Morning, everyone. How are we this morning? Yeah, raise your hand if you're awake. Oh man, we got a bunch of overachievers. Hi, my name is Łukasz Pawłowski.
I'm Adam Saxton.
We're both program managers on the Power BI team. And we're here to talk to you today about distributing insights and governing self-service analytics with Microsoft Power BI. And we're going to run through a whole bunch of things today. So it's going to be a packed agenda. We're going to go pretty quickly. Can I just get a sense at the beginning of who has used Power BI in the room? Okay, quite a lot of you. Okay, who thinks they are a novice? Put your hand up. Okay, who's an expert? Put your hand up. Okay, great. So we're sitting right in the middle there between some folks who are brand new to some people who are a little bit more experienced. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through how, when you're trying to take data and provide it to everyone in your organization so they can make great decisions quickly, how do you actually set that up from a content management viewpoint? What are all the tools that you have? What are the features you can expose or tell your end users so they can find their content? All the way through to governing that at the admin level, making sure that things are secure and locked down, you know where to audit that stuff. Okay, so we're going to go the whole span in about 75 minutes. It'll go quite quickly. Okay, so where I like to start is I like to talk about managing content in Power BI. In Power BI, we have kind of two places where you put content. We have workspaces, and then we have apps. And it's super important for us to understand how they relate to each other. So to start, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show my screen here on my demo machine. And I'm just going to walk through those just to level set what I mean when I say a workspace and an app. So here I am in Power BI. I've logged in as a user. I have a workspace. It's called Łukasz P Demos. It's my own demos. Inside that workspace, I have a bunch of dashboards, reports. I can have workbooks. I don't have any in mine, data sets, and so forth. Right? This is the unit of where we manage content. There's two kinds of workspaces. There's an app workspace, which you use for collaboration. When you and your team need to have a single repository for all the reports that you work on, you put them in a workspace. There's also a separate concept for a personal, it's called My Workspace, where I as an individual can put my own content. When we're talking about distributing insights out to your organization, we really mean use app workspaces and put the content in a central location where multiple people can be members. Right? So that's important. In a workspace, there's this thing called members. Members are a list of people who can have access to that workspace. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is a big flat list, and as you can see, I have quite a number of different dashboards. I have quite a number of different reports, and sometimes it's challenging for the uninitiated to know which one is the official one. If I'm in a team, you know, like Adam and I, we're in a team. Hey, Adam, what's the latest report?
Star Wars?
Star Wars. The Star Wars report. Okay, I'll just go in here, I'll search for Star Wars, I go find it. If your VP comes along and says, what's the latest report? It's typically at 4 in the morning, there's a meeting at 8, you're asleep, and you're reacting. So how do you solve that problem, giving official content to people who need it? Well, what you do is you build an app. And so up here, for every app workspace has an app that you can create. I already created one for this workspace. You provide some basic colors, you provide some basic description. Most importantly, you can choose a subset of the content from your workspace to be in your app. And you can give access to that all in one place. So all those things have access to them all in one place. And that's super important as you try to push out official content into your organization. So the first question that I get, typically, is when should I give access to the workspace? When should I build an app? And when should I share reports individually? And to help with that, going back into the slides, I created a little infographic here that hopefully will elucidate things. So typically, when I have a bunch of content in my workspace, I have different ways that I'm working. We already talked about kind of a team working together. But if I'm like reviewing with a gentleman in the Gap t-shirt here, a piece of content, right? Maybe I'm just going to share that one piece of content to the gentleman here. Why? Because this man, needs only access to that one item. Now, if I did that for 100 different items, you could imagine that's not manageable at all. At some point, this gentleman becomes a member of my team. And it's OK for me to make that person a member of the workspace. And what that means is that person can access all of the content in the workspace. I don't have to share items individually and manage permissions individually. But it also gives him the permission to edit content in that workspace. Okay? Sometimes I want that, sometimes I don't. Now, when I start talking about my VP and all those folks out there who need access to some of the items in my workspace, the ones that I'm willing to maintain and provide official data, that's when I'm going to start to use apps. And so what I can do is, when I create an app, what it actually does is it copies the reports and dashboards I choose into the app. Okay? And what that means, I'm sorry, here we go. It copies the reports and dashboards into the app. And what that means is that you can continue to work on the next iteration of the reports and dashboards in your workspace without confusing your broad audience. So typically what organizations do is they'll have the quarterly reports that they issue, and then they'll start working on the next quarter's reports, as an example, right? And then what you do is you give all those users, the broad audience within your organization, access to the app as app users. And in that way, you can use all of the different kind of ways of sharing content in Power BI to distribute content broadly within your organization. Okay, so that's great so far. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had around workspaces and how we're going to evolve that going forward. We actually have a preview that we shipped at the beginning of August for what we're calling new workspace experiences. So let's dive into that. So the workspaces that we have today in Power BI, what we are calling app workspaces, are actually tied to an Office 365 group. Every time you create a traditional workspace, it creates an Office 365 group. And that's good and bad. It's kind of nice because it creates a SharePoint site, but it's kind of bad because it creates a SharePoint site. Interestingly, when you create an Office 365 group outside of Power BI, it shows up as a workspace in Power BI, and it's empty, which clutters up the workspaces list. So there's another thing where in some organizations, and there's many places where there's regulatory requirements or compliance requirements that govern who can create a workspace. And this is managed at the AAD level because workspaces are tied to Office 365 groups. And that drives a little bit of tension between the BI team that needs workspace creation to be efficient and the overall IT team that wants to review every single Office 365 group that gets created, right? And that tension can mount in an organization. And so what we've done is we've actually introduced a new workspace experience that allows you to create a workspace without creating an Office 365 group. Okay, so let me just go through that here with you for a little bit and show you the differences. Perfect. So I'm back in my demo environment here. And traditionally, when you create a workspace, you click on this little Workspaces tab here, and you go to Create App Workspace here at the bottom. So when I click Create App Workspace, what you'll notice now is that at the very top of the Create Workspace experience, there's this interesting, alluring Try It Now button. And that's a really nice button because that's the button that gets you into the new workspace experience. Button. I clicked the button. So it was very alluring, so I clicked it. So what I can do is I can say Demo Ignite. And I can give a description if I want. And then I can go ahead and create the workspace. Let's go and create the workspace. Oops. Here we go. And what I can do is, if you see over here, I also can, if I wanted to, I could put it into a dedicated capacity if I had one. And that's really nice. I'm not gonna, it's actually on by default for me because in my test environment, we have a capacity, so it's just going to be a premium workspace. It doesn't have to be. It can work in shared too. So I'm just going to go ahead and save. So now when I have my workspace, I can start uploading content to it. And so the example would be, maybe I'll just put in a sample here real quick, just so that I create my workspace and how we have some content in it. Now this workspace, interestingly, didn't create an Office 365 group. And also what that means is that there won't be an email that gets sent out from Office 365 that you created a group. So now here we are. So we're in my workspace. Probably the first task that you want to do after you have some content in your workspace, you want to give access. So in the top of the ribbon, there's a little access pane. One of the super important things to see here is that, if I go here and I say, let's say Adam, and it'll process, and we'll get Adam here. Now, I can assign roles. Now, in the previous workspaces, there were 2 roles you could assign. There was the admin role that gave you full control of the workspace. You could delete the workspace, rename the workspace, remove anyone from the workspace. And a member role. And the member role could provide and edit content in the workspace, as well as invite others to participate in the workspace through sharing. Well, now we have a 3rd role, and this is the contributor role. This is kind of like a member, except they can only provide content into the workspace. And what that means is you can now separate in workspaces who can help you with content. For example, let's say you have a whole bunch of contractors working on your reporting. You want them to edit the reports and update the reports and so forth, but you don't want them giving their friends access, right? You want to control who has access. So you give your FTEs a member role or give them admin role to go ahead and do that. So I can give Adam contributor role. Of course, the traditional admin roles are there too, and I can go and close. Perfect. Oh, I need to press add. And now Adam was also a contributor. So that extra level of granularity is super interesting and important. We're going to add another role that I'll talk about a little bit later in a further slide that's going to make it even more granular later. What's interesting about these workspaces is that for most end users, they won't even notice that it's different. But I would say one thing, and I'll come back into this experience, is that I can actually do something else here, which is super powerful. I can actually put in, let's say, PBI PM. If I had a security group like this one, I can actually assign it a role. So with these new workspaces, I could actually make all of the program managers in the Power BI team members. I could also use distribution lists, email-enabled security groups, as well as Office 365 groups to give roles. And it gives you more flexibility in terms of managing who has access to a workspace and aligns very closely with how IT manages access to standard content, typically in an organization. Okay. So let's go add everyone as a member. Perfect, we're done. Beyond that, the workspaces work just like the other workspaces. You can view content, you can click through to the underlying reports, and do all those things that you normally do. An important aspect is that these workspaces are no longer in Office 365. What that means is that we've added a whole bunch of capabilities into the Power BI admin portal. Adam will mention a couple of those. As well as into the admin REST API, so that you can replace functionality that you previously used in Office 365 APIs and Office 365 admin portal to manage groups. You'll do that now with these workspaces in the Power BI experience through our APIs or through our admin portal. Perfect. So that's the basics of the new workspace experience. So let me just jump back into the slide deck here real quick. I know that was a whole bunch of stuff, so let's just wrap that up real quick. So first off, creating a new workspace doesn't create an Office 365 group, and that's super important. Another interesting aspect is that you notice that I was adding users into the access list of the workspace. If normally when you use Power BI, when you add a member to an Office 365 group, that member is not only in the workspace, they're also in the Office 365 group. In these new workspaces, we're managing item access at the workspace level, so it's not going to be reflected in the membership of the Office 365 group, right? So that can lead to some things as you iterate. What will happen is those member lists will diverge. So if you want to manage membership using Office 365 groups, go to the Office 365 UI and manage it there. If you want to manage it individually on the workspace in Power BI, you can go do it.
I would add on that, if you want to keep them in sync, if you have something separate, you can use PowerShell to do that between the two.
Perfect. So the second thing that we need to talk about is we can assign workspace roles. And we talked about assigning them to security groups, email-enabled security groups, distribution lists, and Office 365 groups. And that's a super important capability. It's been sought after for a really long time. And it was something that we had challenges with. You have more granular workspace roles. And what that means is that you have more flexibility about how you manage access to the underlying content. You have better sharing. One of the important things is that Today in the existing workspaces between sharing, workspace access, and apps, there are different kinds of security groups or distribution groups you can put in different places. With the new workspace experience, it's unified. If there's an access list in Power BI, you can use any of those primitives to give access to that item. You're no longer trying to do your PhD and permissions in Power BI. So it's a huge important thing. So with apps, one of the big things that's happening is there's a subtle thing about apps, which is workspace users today do not get access to the app, which can be very confusing. And now with the new workspace experiences, they will automatically get access to the app. And so that means that anyone who's helping contribute content into the workspace will be able to see the app for the content. So if there's any question about what's the official numbers, those people who manage that content can immediately go to the app and show the end user what that right number is. And the last piece we touched on briefly is that in the Power BI Admin API, Admin Center, we have a new Power BI Admin portal, as well as some admin APIs and some PowerShell scripts. Great. So now let's talk a little bit about workspace roles in a little bit more detail. I mentioned them in the demo, but I wanted to just provide this slide out to you so that you could actually see all of the differences. The first thing is the admin role really doesn't change very much. The member role in the new workspaces takes on a little bit more responsibility than it had before. Already in the existing workspaces, a member could share any piece of content to any arbitrary user and could delegate the reshare permission so that the recipient could reshare that with anyone else. Well, what we've done is we've unified what being a member means. If they can give access to one item, and they can go sequentially and give access to all 100 items, why can't they just give access to the workspace as well? And so we've actually enabled members to be able to give access and give other users membership in the workspace. The new contributor role, which is available today, just provides content into the workspace. And so you can now separate which users you trust to give access to the workspace versus which ones you need to provide content. As we move through our execution into what we'll call GA, which is our general availability for the feature, we'll also add a last role, which is the viewer role. And this is a super important role because it provides read-only access to the workspace content. Who here has used a read-only workspace in Power BI today? Okay, so just a few. There's an interesting capability when you create a traditional kind of workspace tied to an Office 365 group. You can choose whether members can edit or whether members can only read. And that's an interesting sort of dichotomy because as someone managing multiple workspaces, you go into that workspace in Power BI and you see member, and they look like they can edit, but they can't, right, because of this other setting. And what we're doing is we're getting rid of that sort of strangeness by introducing the viewer role. So when we migrate eventually, users who are members in a read-only workspace will become viewers in the new workspace experience. And that'll give you a full set of capabilities for giving out content in the workspaces as needed. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing with the workspaces preview and how we're getting to GA. The first thing to say is we're taking our time. And we're taking our time very, very intentionally so that we work through any kind of issues that we see with customers who are early adopters before we make a switch from the existing workspaces into the new workspaces infrastructure. In the long run, all workspaces in Power BI will be using the new workspaces infrastructure. And we're going to do that in stages. The first stage will be getting to what we call GA. And at GA, we believe the new workspaces experiences will be high quality enough that they'll be the primary experience. When you create a workspace in Power BI, you will create a new workspace. And any new tenants that would come into Power BI would be using the new workspace experiences. Okay? Now, for everyone who's been using Power BI already, we're going to migrate you slowly into the new workspace experience. At GA, or slightly before, we'll give you the option to migrate your workspace. And we'll provide it at the workspace level. And we'll also provide admins the ability to review all of the workspaces in their organization and move them when they feel ready. Okay? So that's the first step. At some point, we will start the cadence of migrating all the remaining workspaces that weren't migrated manually into the new workspace experience. And we'll give you an announcement of when that's going to happen, and we'll start notifying users that they need to migrate their workspaces. Importantly, during this time when we have migration available, we will allow you to roll back to the previous version of the workspace. Thank you. And it's super important, because what that means is that if something should go wrong right after your critical workspace got migrated, you can go back. Now, importantly, that will be a lossy, because it will be essentially recovery to the previous version of the workspace. So we'll give you some options and tools, right? But it'll give you a chance, at least, if something goes terribly wrong, to go back. So we're trying to be very circumspect about making sure that this capability of the service, which is depended on by everyone, works very well all the way through the transition to the new workspace experiences. Okay, right, so that's enough about workspaces. Next, let's talk about some of the new stuff that we're working on as well. So the first one is datasets discovery. So one of the big challenges we have with workspaces today is that it's easy to create content on a data set in a single workspace. You can have as many dashboards, as many reports as you want. The problem is that many times organizations want one data set to be the official data set that all the reports in the organization work on, and they want business groups to be able to be empowered to create their own reports on that without putting all those reports in the standard official workspace where all the official reports are being created. And so what we're doing is we're going to enable you to take a data set and start promoting it within the organization, and we're going to enable you to find those data sets, all the data sets you have access to in your organization's Power BI, and then start creating content in an arbitrary workspace. And this is going to be transformational. We call this sometimes shared data sets. We're calling it the data set discovery experiences for the sake of documentation. And it's going to be fantastic, because not only will we be able to have the same data sets used across multiple different workspaces, as an IT team, you'll be able to certify specific data sets as being official. And that means users will have confidence that they're getting the right data, not someone's copy of the data. And that's going to be very powerful for organizations. So sometimes, as we talk about that, people, sort of struggle to kind of grasp that. So let's just take a look at pictures. We're going to have a workspace in which there's a data set, and then I can have reports in that original workspace for sure. But through the data set discovery experience, I'll be able to create a second workspace and a third workspace where I can also have reports tying into that particular data set. Whenever that data set refreshes, all those reports refresh, right? So it's actually very, very powerful. Also, the data set owner, whoever's managing the access to that data set, will be able to see all the permissions that are being granted to that data set and can remove them and can set them up with the appropriate access rights. And that way, they have control over who in the organization is able to see the data. One of the important aspects is that you'll be able to then reuse data sets across many workspaces, but you'll also be able to reuse data sets across many apps. And that's a huge ask. Many people ask us for multiple apps from a single workspace. This is not quite that, but it's one of the elements that we have in our roadmap that will start addressing that need. What that means is that you can copy your reports to other workspaces and package them independently for different audiences. It's going to be a transformational kind of experience. Okay. And of course, you get one version of the truth. So with that, let's talk a little bit about how apps are evolving. So as we know, apps are the way to distribute content within the organization. Many reports and dashboards, you package into a single easy install. And what's going to happen now is that we're going to start iterating on those app experiences. And one important element of that is going to be personalizing apps. So today when you get an app, it's a read-only view, and as a user, you take what you got. But we're going to start evolving that. We're going to start allowing users to save a copy of reports and dashboards from the app, initially to their My Workspace and later to any workspace. Okay? And as the app author, you will have control over who can do that within your organization. Right? So you'll be able to have knobs and switches. Some apps you'll say, no, I don't want anyone personalizing. Others, maybe you'll enable it. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to add custom navigation into the app. And that's going to make apps far easier to use. And I'll show you a click-through of what that's going to look like. The code's not ready yet to demo today. So let's take a look a little bit about here in an infographic. So you're going to have a workspace, and it's going to have a data set. You're going to create the app, and the app content connects back to the data set, which means that you still have one source of truth. And then what happens is when a user personalizes into their My Workspace, it's still connected to that one source of truth, right? So you have all those decisions, no matter if it's official app content or personalized content from the app, are all tied to that same data set. That's going to be super, super exciting. So we talked about a whole bunch of things. I did want to talk briefly about licensing, because it always comes up. And so I thought I'd take a second to talk about it. One of the big things that you should know is we have two kinds of user licenses for users. We have Power BI Pro, and then we have the free entitlement. Okay? In addition, we have what Adam likes to call the content license, which is the Power BI Premium capacity, which you can purchase. And what's interesting about that is that once you have some piece of content, if you put it into a workspace that itself is in a capacity, free users get more rights. And this little matrix sort of tries to help you understand what that is. So if you're in shared, a free user cannot access a workspace, cannot view shared reports, cannot view the app, cannot view embedded content. But once it's in a premium capacity, they can consume shared reports, they can consume the app, and they can consume embedded content. And that starts helping you distribute to large audiences within your organization. So now let's take a look at how we're going to be evolving our app navigation experience. So today, when you go create an app, it kind of looks like this, right? So you're in your workspace, and this is what I showed earlier. You go up to the top left corner, and there's a update app or create app button. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to change that experience a little bit. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to, oops, I need the other mouse. Here we go. So the first thing that we're going to do is, okay, how does this work? There we go. I have to click the button. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make apps more supportable. And what that means is that when a user has questions about your app, you'll be able to provide a support website, a discussion forum, and an email address that they'd be able to email. Today, people don't know who to call, right? So they scramble around in email trying to find the owner of the app and try to ask them. And that will help large organizations. Many organizations, for example, are using apps to distribute to their sales field. And that sales field is like 18,000, 30,000 employees. And they just can't handle that. But they already have some kind of support mechanism for those folks. And now they'll be able to funnel all those questions and requests back into the app. Perfect. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to provide new ability to create navigation within your apps. And what does that mean? That means that when you're creating an app, you will be able to create a left navigation that can contain grouped items. Like here we have marketing and sales. It's a grouped item. So you can actually reorganize how your users will consume that content and see the content. So it's much easier to navigate around within the app. And then, when we're done, what will happen is the new version of apps will look wonderful. And so here, for example, you can see how that navigation that was defined on the previous slide is experienced by the user. No more navigating to some crazy content list off in the corner. It'll just be right there for your users. They can easily understand things. And that's going to be a huge thing. Everyone we've shown this to has just loved it. And so it's going to be a really big thing for us as we go forward. Okay? So far, so good. So now let's talk a little bit about content packs. Who here has used a Power BI content pack? Okay. So if you had your hand up, we're going to need to start on a migration story away from content packs. And that's going to happen in a number of different stages. The first is all those things I was telling you about personalizing apps and shared data sets are getting built so that we can deprecate content packs and move away from them, right? Because content packs kind of enable some of those scenarios today. And so we want to give you replacements in the product that work better, are more standardized, are easier to manage. And so we're adding those things first. The second thing that we'll say is that the workspace enhancements that we're doing, the new workspace experiences, they don't support content packs. So you cannot create or consume a content pack from a new workspace. And then the last thing to say is we won't support the content packs that you have after we complete the migration. So if you do have a content pack today, you'll have plenty of time, but you should repackage it as an app and get ready for that world. And then as we have those experiences for personalizing apps, start using those to start distributing your content. Great. So with that, let me start talking a little bit about enabling end users. So fine, we're distributing content out to our organization. But now if I'm an end user, I'm a business user, how do I consume that content so that I can find the data that's important to me and I can collaborate with my coworkers on the insights that are important so that I can quickly answer my boss, quickly make that decision, win the new market, make the difference in society. Okay, so how do I do that? We're going to do a number of pieces, and I'm going to show you a few demos here. We're going to introduce a new home experience, talk about commenting, persistent filters, sharing with filters, and some personal bookmarks. So let's see how all that stuff works. So let's talk first about home. Home, which actually, it says coming soon, but you know what? Some of you, if you log into Power BI this morning, will have it.
I saw it. It was in my.
Okay. So
there.
it's now. And what's amazing is home is the new experience for end users. When they log in by default to Power BI, they will see all of the data that's important to them. They will see data that they use frequently, that they favorited, that they used recently. If someone has pushed an app to them so that they have content, it will show up right there on the home screen. We'll even show you recommended content based off of our understanding of what content's being used by your peers in your organization so that you can have the same insights that they have. And even if you haven't ever used Power BI, there's a bunch of cool learning materials there for you to take a look at. And so without further ado, let's go take a look at what home actually looks like. So here is the new Power BI experience. You'll notice that I'm logged into my Power BI account, and I have this beautiful "Good morning, Łukasz" here. And I can have a few data insights that are here. I'll talk about how those get here in a second. But those are important. Like, so if I'm interested in sales and marketing, I can see the key insights at a glance. I don't have to go anywhere. I see favorites and frequents. These are all the items that I've used frequently. In this particular case, I've favorited every single one I use frequently. But if I use something that's not, it'll just show up in this list. You'll see that I have access to all of my recent items and all of my apps. I have recommended apps. And so if I wanted to find other apps that are interesting, like for example, the Power BI design team just published their app. And take a look at this. I have it right here. I could install it. This is actually really cool because this is literally my production account at Microsoft, and I didn't know they published an app. So this is super cool that now I have access to their content. I don't have to call them every time I want to know how do I get metrics about various usability capabilities. Okay? And then I have things that are shared with me. So if someone shared something to me, it'll just show up here. What's interesting is that we have users in different maturities of their use of Power BI. Some users only use one piece of content. Some users use hundreds. And this UI will adapt based off of how much content you've used, and it'll just sort of accordion down so that you're always seeing something that's valuable to you the first time that you log in. And then if you want to, you can take a look at all of the learning materials down here at the bottom so that you can actually learn and advance your skills as a Power BI user. And then what I like to say is, but wait, there's more. Okay? And so one cool thing about this is that we've also added global search. And what that means is that now you can search across all of the workspaces, apps, dashboards, reports, and data sets that you have in your Power BI environment and find them quickly from one place. And so going to simplify tremendously how business users interact and navigate around the Power BI experience. So in this case, you can see that I have a couple of workspaces. This is the workspace I started with, the WKHP demos. I have a bunch of reports and so forth, and I can go down through all of them as I go through. Okay? So this is going to be huge. It literally landed this morning. I'm super excited about it. When we look at customer satisfaction for users around the world, it is significantly higher for users who've experienced this experience. So we're really stoked to have it out there. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about a little bit is commenting. So how do users work with each other? Well, they ask each other questions, right? That's pretty much question and answer is probably the number one way in which, besides guess and check, is the number one way in which people work with each other. And we've added commenting now to the Power BI service, and it's also available for you. And what that means is that you can start a conversation about data that you have access to, about a report or dashboard, and then you can even @mention people in the comments so they get notified, and then they can start working together. Importantly, we've shipped it for dashboards today. We'll be shipping it soon for reports. Okay, so let's go take a look at kind of like what that looks like here. So you'll notice that I have this sales and marketing dashboard here on my home. And if I come into this, what I'll do is I'll actually look at a particular set of tiles here. And what I can say is, like, maybe this tile is interesting. There's a big dip in June. So what I can actually do is I can go click, and you'll notice that there's a new add comment feature here at the top of the ... menu. It's right off the ... menu. And when I click on that, what will happen is the commenting pane will come up. And what's interesting is you'll notice here, and I don't know if you can see it clearly on the screen, but this visual is highlighted and all the other ones are not. Well, that means I'm commenting on that one particular visual. And so what I can say is something like, hey, takes just a second here on demo Wi-Fi to pull up the email address. Here we go. And now I can post a comment. And you'll notice that, and you probably can't see that really clearly, but I @mentioned Adam. I mean, I could have turned around, but maybe like I'm a millennial or something, and I just prefer to text. And so I just asked Adam. Now, what's interesting is that Adam will actually get an email, but even better, if Adam has the Power BI app open and it has a network connection, what will happen is Adam's phone will buzz with a push notification, right, Adam?
Yep, there it is.
Well, there it is. So Adam just buzzed, and that means that we can quickly get collaboration going between users within the organization. This is super helpful to speed up the rate at which you can make data-driven decisions in your organization. Okay, so that's commenting. You'll notice also that it has a little icon here next to it, and what I'll do is when I come back in to view the icon, to view the comment, I can actually see it here. The other thing to say is, if you wanted to see all the comments for the dashboard, you can see them up in the action bar here. It's just under comments, right? So you can go see that. People who are owners of the dashboard can go back and delete comments too, if they want to. Okay, so that's commenting. Again, available for dashboards today, coming soon to reports. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is personal bookmarks. Who has used the bookmark feature in Power BI Desktop? Okay, great. So a handful of you. So if you haven't used it before, it's a tremendously powerful feature for authors. What it does is you can go and create a report page, and then you can filter it. And let's say you can capture a bookmark. Then you can filter it again and capture another bookmark again and again and again. You can even hide and show visuals, navigate to different pages, on and on and on. And then when you're done, you can package that as a bespoke navigation experience inside your reports, publish them to your users, and then you can go through, and they can get a much more like presentation-like experience in the report. That's great for authors, super expressive. But we're going to bring that same kind of capability for end users, because end users look at reports all the time. They slice and filter, and they want to be able to see those bookmarks the next time they come back into their reports. Okay? So that's super powerful. And so you'll be able to switch between bookmarks. Now, we don't have this in the cluster right now, but I wanted to show you a quick slide click-through for how that's going to work. So the first thing that you'll notice is at the top of this report, we have a new personal bookmarks page. And when you click on it, you could click to create a new bookmark. And what it'll do is it will allow you to go create a new bookmark here. And you can go see previous bookmarks as well. And what it'll do is it'll capture all of the filter state, the page state that you have on the current page, and we'll just capture it. And then you'll be able to eventually share those bookmarks. So you'll be able to send someone an email, and when they receive that email, they'll see exactly what's in the bookmark. What's interesting is we're kind of tiptoeing our way into that right now, okay? And the way that we're doing that is we've added a little tiny feature that allows you to share with filters persisted. So let's go back into my dashboard, and I'm going to click on this sentiment report. And you'll notice this report has a lot of different sort of data in it. And I could go click through it as a normal business user would, and maybe I'll find one particular slice of that data that's super interesting. And I just want to make sure that Adam's aware of it, because I think it was related to that thing with June, right? Poor Adam's going to have a full inbox at the end of this, right? But I can go and press the share button, and I can say, Adam. There we are. And you'll notice this little tiny checkbox here at the bottom. Share report with current filters and slicers. Okay? If I check that little box, what will happen is we will save off that slicer state, this Van Arsdale over here, and it'll be included in the link that's sent in the email. So I'm just going to go ahead and send that. Now let's say I'm Adam, and I received that. We'll get an email very similar looking to this one. When I click to view that report, what will happen is it'll just open, and it'll load and apply that filter state to the report. This will just take a second here, and we'll soon see the exact thing that I was commenting on in that email. Right? So here we are, came in, Van Arsdale. Super important. Now, one other thing that we've done is, now Adam has seen this report, and he's seen it sliced this particular way. Now, if Adam navigates to a different report, we've actually captured that he looked at Van Arsdale the last time. So let's say his computer needs to reboot or something, he comes back into the report and says, where was I? We've actually picked it up already. And we have this little button right here at the very top of the UI, this reset to default. We call this persistent filters, okay? So that we just persist the filters automatically so you can pick up from where you left off. And so Adam would then be able to press the reset to default, navigate the little reset UI, and then see what the author wanted him to see when he viewed the report. Super efficient, super great for a user to just continue working naturally. So while we don't have personal bookmarks yet, we're sort of tiptoeing our way into building all the underlying layers to be able to expose that really crazy cool experience for end users. Okay. So now we're talking about distributing insights. We talked about how to organize content into workspaces and apps and use sharing. We talked about the new workspace experience. We talked about the new app experiences. We talked about end user experiences. Now, if you're, who here has a SharePoint deployment? Ooh, quite many. Office 365, like SharePoint Online? Yeah. SharePoint on premises? Okay, ooh, that's interesting. That's changed significantly. So what I just saw is that most folks have an Office 365 deployment that has SharePoint Online, and a few still have SharePoint on premises. Well, what we're doing with Power BI is we're trying to make it really easy so that you can embed our content into the portals that matter to you, whether they're SharePoint Online, whether they're SharePoint on-premises or any arbitrary portal. And we have a number of things that we've done to do that. The first is to say, we have, you can distribute through the SharePoint Online web part, which is already there. It supports reports. We mentioned, I should call back and mention the Power BI mobile apps. One of the cool things about Power BI is that we distribute content no matter where you are in the world. And we enable you access through a cloud service that's always available. And then the mobile apps make it super personal so that if you're in the middle of the shopping line and you want to know how your business metrics are while you're waiting for to go through checkout, you can actually go do that. But the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring what we're calling secure embed to the service. Who here has used publish to web? Okay. I bet you for the folks that did raise their hand, quite likely some of your organizational users used it inappropriately. Publish to web is super easy, so easy that many people put their content into SharePoint pages using publish to web, and it's not secure. It's intended to be on public websites where anyone in the world can see it and be hosted at scale so that it works really nicely. What we're going to do is we're going to bring an embedding mode to Power BI that's just as easy as publish to web, but is fully secure, enforcing user authentication, enforcing item permissions, enforcing row-level security, and it's going to support any portal that supports an iframe or a URL embed code, and it's just going to work. And so that's something that we're not quite ready to show yet. Awesome. Thank you. We're not quite ready to show it yet. It's getting close. I hoped I could show it to you today, but it is super compelling. Many people have asked me, how do I embed my Power BI content securely into SharePoint on-premises? Our secure embed capability will be that capability that helps you do that in a super simple, super easy way. Okay. So one next step is that many organizations work not only internally, but they work with partners. And they need to securely collaborate with those partners on data that's important to both groups. And so one of the things that we have in Power BI, we added this at the end of last calendar year, is we added the ability to do Azure B2B to provide centrally managed sharing with other organizations. And so the way that works is, who here has used Azure B2B? Okay, just a handful. Okay, great. So the way that it actually works is a user in your tenant, we'll call that your home tenant, can share with an external user. Okay? And that user gets invited to the AAD. And that user becomes a user principal in AAD. And then you can give them access to reports, either through sharing or access to apps. And what's interesting about that is that you can actually manage who in your organization can do that. Specifically, who can invite external users into your organization. You can lock it down. You can manage it at the security group. You can manage it at the AAD level, so your central team can do that. You can also manage that at the Power BI level. There's a setting in the admin portal that I think we'll talk about here in a second. But it's super easy then to share with your partners individual pieces of content or entire sets of content in a secure and manageable way that goes through all the audit logs and so forth. Importantly, let's talk a little bit about licensing there. It is important to know that those users who are coming in externally do need to be licensed Power BI users. And they can either be licensed as a pro user, or they can get enabled through that premium capacity, right? Where I said your content gets your superpowers, right, through that premium capacity. There's a neat little thing we did to make the Power BI ecosystem sort of easier to use. Is that if the external user has a Power BI Pro license in their home tenant, it works for all tenants. And what that means is that if you share to an external user who has a Power BI Pro license, your content doesn't need to be in a premium, and you don't need to give them a Pro license, because they bring their own license into your tenant. It's a really compelling capability that we added. If they don't, then you do have to either put it in premium or assign them a license. Okay? So great. So I talked about a whole bunch of things, Adam. And we created a whole bunch of content. We shared to a whole bunch of users. We created a whole bunch of cool dashboards. We pinned them all around. Can we manage and govern any of this stuff?
Of course we can.
Oh, that's great. I was getting worried there for a second, even as I was talking.
Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble, right?
I certainly don't want to get in trouble. So
All
how do we actually make sure that organizations don't get themselves?
So let's go into this a little bit. I love like the admin and governance capabilities of the product. This is like my sweet mistress when I get up in the morning. It's great stuff. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is the admin portal inside of Power BI. So this is a place where you as a tenant organization, the administrator of this organization can go in and get some of those controls over what folks can do. And this is the number one thing admins love to do, right? They love to control what people can do in the organization. And so let me go through, we'll jump in and just dive right into that admin experience. So we will go in, see this is the home, this is a production tenant, so home is definitely there. That's good. So if we go up to the gear or cog or whatever we want to call it, we will see an admin portal. How many folks in here are actually admins of their tenant? Ooh, wow, look at that. I think that's the most I've ever seen in a talk. That's outstanding. All right, so for you guys, that will light up for you. Actually, everyone will see admin portal, but you won't necessarily see everything in the admin portal. You may only see capacity settings. So if you do have specific admin rights inside of Power BI, we will see a whole slew of items. One of these will be tenant settings, and so we're going to focus on that. And when we go in here, we have a ton of different settings that are available to help control the Power BI experience. And one of these that comes with the new workspace experience is this create workspaces, which means that you will be able to control who can create those workspaces inside of the organization, which is outstanding, right? So before, the Office 365 administrators were the ones that could control the modern groups, and when they turned that off, you may have gotten an awesome experience inside of Power BI that was like, I don't know, unknown error or something under the covers, but now we can get this holistic experience inside of Power BI where you can manage who can actually create those workspaces. Of note, this setting is just for the new workspace experience. It does not govern the old workspace experience. So we're kind of in this transition space, but for going forward after the migration and everything, this will be outstanding. And when we go into one of these settings, most of them have what we call granular control. And what this means is that I can actually go through, I can either disable or enable the setting altogether, or I can decide who can actually take advantage of this. So the entire organization or specific security groups. And then I can whitelist or blacklist these items as needed. And so for create workspaces here, I could define these are the groups in my organization that have the capability to create those workspaces. Along with that, like I said, there's a bunch of other items in here. Łukasz mentioned the publish to web experience, that it's not secure. So this may be something in your organization where you want to really control this feature to prevent the unintended exposure of data inside of your organization. And so from publish to web experience, you could say, look, these folks are the ones that can actually use the publish to web feature. The rest of my organization cannot. And so you can go through and see all sorts of different items inside of the admin portal that you can enable and disable, and we add to this all the time as we see a need to do so. That's great. All right. So that is the admin portal. One of the things I mentioned is that if you're a Power BI administrator, you can see these items. For those that are not, you would only see capacity settings as part of the list when you go to the admin portal. And let me talk about the admin types a little bit here because I know sometimes this can be confusing. I get a lot of questions on this. First off, we have the Office 365 Global Administrator. This is the one that pretty much has the keys to the kingdoms, right? This is the highest level of access you can have within an Azure Active Directory tenant or an Office 365 organization. There are other admin roles inside of Office 365 that can be applied. One of those being something like a billing administrator. So this one has the capability of purchasing items. There's also another role defined as Power BI Service Administrator. From a Power BI perspective, we look at whether or not you're a global administrator or you're a Power BI Service Administrator. So if you have either of those roles defined to you, you would see the entire admin portal experience inside of Power BI. So those are really the two that we care about. from a Power BI perspective. There are other admin capabilities within inside of Power BI from a more granular perspective. So for example, if you have a capacity deployed into your organization, so Power BI Premium or Azure Power BI Embedded, these can also have a declared capacity administrator that just gives them access to that capacity. So they don't have this full admin experience to toggle those tenant settings and maybe mess with some people, you never know. But they will be able to control the actual capacity and define items within inside of that. And then app workspaces, as Wukash showed you, there is an admin level setting for that as well. So we could just define it down to they have access to this workspace and can manage that, but not everything else into the Power BI service. All right, I'm going to go through a couple other things, and instead of using the slides, we'll just go through. And let's take a look at one of the things we want to understand is usage of my reports inside of, discard the changes there, usage with inside of either my dashboard or report. So as an individual user, one of the things you'll have access to are usage statistics inside of a report or dashboard. So I have a dashboard here, and what we will see on the top is you will see a usage metrics icon on top. When we select that, this will go ahead and load, and you will end up seeing usage of this individual dashboard within your organization. And so we can get some insights into this. This is great. As an individual or as an author of this content, I can kind of get an idea for adoption within inside of my organization, who's viewing it, how many, to just understand, is this report or dashboard useful within inside of my organization? From an admin experience, the other thing that we have access to is what's called the audit log. And so the audit log is what captures all of the activity within my organization. And this can be extremely powerful. So the audit log for Power BI is part of the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. And so this is tied to the Office 365 infrastructure. And by default, only the global admins are going to be the ones that have access to this. And there are ways that you can go in and add permissions. So I can make a non-admin user, give them the ability to look at this audit log. The one thing to be aware of, though, if you want to go down that path, is that giving them access to the audit log gives them access to everything within inside of the Office 365 tenant. So this is not just Power BI, right? This is not a Power BI thing. This is an Office 365 thing. And so they would see access from a SharePoint perspective, Exchange Online. Typically, my experience is that the global administrators do not want to expose that to a broader set of people. But it is possible to do that. When we go look inside of the audit log search area, we can go down and we can see, let's get to Power BI. There are a lot of things in here. And we can see several Power BI activities that are listed here. Everything from, view a dashboard, view a report, created a report, signed up for the Power BI Pro 60-day trial. These are all things that we can get insights to in terms of what's happening with inside of my organization. I think that right now there's about 90 activities within inside of this. And so if I go through and pick a couple, look and see what's happened in here. Should get some activity. Let's go view report also. All right. And we'll give it a day range. Search for it. This will show up information that's listed out. I'll see IP address. I'll see the user who actually performed that activity, and then I'll see associated data as a result of it as well. And so we can see here, so I can see my user, I can see the activity they did, I can see the item of that. So from a dashboard perspective, I can see customer profitability, and I can also see additional detail as well. From an export perspective, I can go ahead and take this log and export it to Excel or CSV, but it's within the context of what I searched on. And I can tell you with inside of this interface, there's not a lot of flexibility, so there can be a lot of data there and prevent you from actually searching properly. So there are other ways to export the audit log. One is through PowerShell, so that's through the Exchange Online PowerShell commandlets. That has a 90-day sliding window, so you can get 90 days worth of data out of that. The other thing we have is the Power BI, the Usage Statistics Solution template. And this was created by one of our partners, Neil Analytics. But what it does is it allows you to set up a predefined solution template that pulls the activity data from the Office 365 management APIs, which has a 7-day sliding window. And because of these sliding windows, we want to make sure that that data gets archived so that we can look at activity and trends over time. And what this will do is set up some Azure resources, so an Azure Logic app to pull the data, an Azure SQL database to archive the data, and they also supply you with a report that you can connect to that Azure SQL database to go ahead and gain insights into that activity without having to deal with all the code. So this is a no-code solution for you, and it allows you to get all of this data in an easy-to-use format. Doesn't mean that this is the only way that you have to get this information. It is used through the Office 365 management API, so you can absolutely write code around that and create your own custom solution if you feel so inclined. And then as part of this, I can go around and I can select, slice and dice, and understand who's doing what inside of my organization. And also gain things like, adoption rates or, tracking usage for campaigns within inside of your organization. So this goes beyond security and governance. It's also about the user experiences within inside of your organization and gaining insights into that. Okay, so those are ways that we can go in and look at details within inside of my organization. One of the other things we released recently that I really love is, let me go down a little bit, and we have REST APIs that are available inside of Power BI that you can actually go in and programmatically go in, get cataloging information. You can do ALM type operations. One of the things we introduced recently are the admin APIs. And so what's awesome about this is I can actually add value to my audit log in understanding who owns certain things. So I may see like, hey, so-and-so viewed this dashboard, and I have that dashboard ID and data set ID, but now I want to go through and understand maybe ownership of those items. And I can use the admin APIs to do that, because now with the admin APIs, it used to be with the original APIs, we could only look at items that we had access to. And so as an admin, it was frustrating because I want to see everything in my organization. But with the admin APIs now, I can do just that. So I can look at all workspaces within inside of the organization. I can look at all dashboards, reports, any of those items, and I can pick out information based on that. To make this even easier, as Łukasz said, wait, there's more. We produced a set of PowerShell commandlets for Power BI that wrap these items. Because from a REST API perspective, it's a code thing, right? So you've got to write code, you got to manage the access ID or the access token from Azure Active Directory. You got to do all this plumbing to get this to work. And so we introduced these PowerShell commandlets that wrap all of that for you. There's no need to do this thing called an app registration in Azure Active Directory, and it just caused a lot of headaches. So we took care of all this for you. And let me go ahead and show what we can do there. We'll jump over to my awesome PowerShell commandlet window, and what I can do is log in Power BI, and we'll do something very simple like Power BI workspaces. So what I'm going to do here is just get a list of workspaces within inside of my organization. It's going to ask me to sign in. Go ahead and do that. And there we go. So let me go ahead and bring this up. And so what I can see here is by default, just calling the workspace, get workspace command, this is just going to list out the workspaces that I have access to. So this is the normal thing, nothing new here. It's just getting those items that I have access to. The other thing that's interesting too is we give you a little bit of information, one of those being a tenant ID. I like this a lot just because when I talk with customers and we're dealing with escalations or things of that nature, we may need to know what that is. And so this is a way you can go get the tenant ID if you ever need it. There are other ways to do it, but this is pretty handy to do. You just get that immediately when you log in. And then you will see all of those workspaces within inside of your organization. Now, let's clear that out. To get the actual list of every workspace in my organization, what I can do is add or define a scope. And so if we go to scope, do organization. The default is individual. So let me go ahead and run this. Now I see all of the workspaces listed within inside of my organization. And so if we go in there, you'll also see personal workspaces as well. So these are the My Workspaces inside of your organization. This lights up a whole slew of capabilities. One being, the example I like to use is people tend to publish items into their My Workspace, and then we use this as a corporate report. And then that person ends up leaving their organization. That causes a problem, right? Because like, I need to get this. And so one of the things that these will light up for you is the capabilities to extract said report in dashboard, or not the dashboard, but get the report item out of that, and then republish that out to an app workspace, right? So we can recover those items. We can maybe figure out what's going on. And so these are all things that we're working on to make this easier for administration within inside of your organization. The one question I get a lot also, this is just the first wave, right? We're going to be doing more with this. One of the things I get asked a lot is, okay, that's great. How can I see all the gateways in my organization, right? And so that's one of the things that we're going to next, right? We're going to be doing those items to give you more insights and control into your organization. A lot of enterprise organizations are asking for this, and so we want to be able to enable that for you. And the items we see here, the admin items that are available right now, this is focused on content right now. So we've got workspaces, dashboards, reports, and data sets. So I can discover those throughout my organization. And the other item that I like here is one of the items that's available is the ability to add a user to a workspace. Right now, this works with the new workspace experience. It does not work with the old workspace experience. So again, we're in this kind of transition period. But what that would allow you to do is, as an organization, we want to make sure that maybe the IT group or our governance group has access to all workspaces within inside of our organization. And so from a scripting perspective, you could go through and actually check to see, hey, is this group assigned to this workspace? If it's not, add it. And then you can guarantee that all of your workspaces you have access to from a compliance or IT-focused perspective. So that's really cool. So another item that comes as with this is we have all these REST APIs. Not all of the REST APIs are wrapped inside of this PowerShell commandlet, but one of the things we did provide is a function called invoke Power BI REST method. And what this does is it allows us to call any of the Power BI REST APIs without needing to do all that plumbing or overhead in terms of the Azure AD app registration and getting the access token and all of those items. You can just call this command and it'll work with anything. So if I just want to maybe say I've got an SSIS package and at the end of it, my data warehouse is ready to go, I want to trigger a refresh inside of Power BI, I can just call the refresh API using this PowerShell commandlet command and it'll work. So that makes it a lot easier in terms of what we've had to do before. All right, I didn't want to do that. All right, so with that, I think that's kind of a whirlwind tour from the admin and governance side of it. Are there any questions that you may have? That's something we kind of touched on but didn't go into details, or I guess anything in general?
Yeah, we might ask you to come up to the microphones.
If you can come up to the microphones, that'd be great.
Top in front of the aisles, that way it's there for the recording.
And then while they're walking up, Wukash and I are both on Twitter. We're both active on Twitter, so feel free to hit us up there. It's a great way to engage with us. Yes, sir.
Any delays in any of this new functionality within the GCC?
Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry, say that one more time.
For global or government customers, any delay in any of the new functionality?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what ends up happening is we deploy, essentially we start on a Monday, right? We deploy our cluster. The following week, we typically update all the government clouds, so the sovereign clouds, and that's the GCC environment, the environment over in Germany, as well as the one in China. Now, sometimes features don't make it immediately there. For example, the new workspace experience is not currently available in GCC because there's a dependency that we're waiting on in that environment. So some features can get delayed, but generally the clusters update the week after the general community clusters go.
Go ahead.
With regards to the comments, is there a connector to that? Can you do sentiment analysis or anything across that?
Any data set access for commenting? Like get access to that?
So, okay, I didn't really talk about permissions for commenting. So what ends up happening is, there's no magic. When a user mentions, like I mentioned Adam may or may not have access to that piece of content. When Adam gets that link and clicks on it, it'll actually either get access because I had permission to give him permission at the time I mentioned him, or if I didn't, he'll get a request access, and he'll need to go through the workflow, and he'll probably come back to me and say, hey, I can't access this thing, and we'll go get access for him if he needs it.
I think the question was, as they make comments, and there's maybe negative or positive sentiment in those comments,
sorry.
how do they go through and analyze that?
There's no sentiment provided. You can't provide sentiment on comments, and we don't expose that as a data set right now. It's an interesting thing. Maybe ideas.powerbi.com would be a great place to put that one.
Yeah. All right.
Embedded Power BI reports in the new SharePoint modern web pages. I've played with this a little bit. I've had massive access issues. It seems to be that the permission to view the report is driven by membership of the workspace. The new workspaces, I hope, will make that a lot better, but is there any thinking about enhancing that? Because like the passing dynamic filters doesn't work, and like, you know, just global visibility of a report would be another lovely feature. Is there anything in the pipeline there?
Yes, so there's two investments that we're doing. The first one is on all these access issues. We recognize that depending on how you get a link in Power BI and it applies equally well in the SharePoint web part, sometimes users have access, sometimes they don't, and they get request access prompts. We are in the process of fixing all of that. In fact, as this morning, new canonical URLs for reports will have rolled out, and that means that if you have a URL that you got through the sharing pane, regardless of whether you got permission access through sharing or whether you're a member of the workspace, it will just work for you. We're going to bring that to dashboards, and we're in the process of solving that for embed, for SharePoint embed, so that no matter how you got the link, if you have permission to the item, you'll be able to see it embedded. So that piece is right on our target list, and we're fixing that right now. The second question is, what's the investment path forward for the SharePoint web part? So the first thing that we're doing is we're going to iterate on that web part. It's backed up a little bit behind this secure embed that I mentioned because we want to get that out of the way first. But the following set of investments is, first off, a little bit more control about how you view the content. Like people have asked for full screen, be able to open the report back in Power BI. And then we will evaluate, can we plug into any kind of programmability so that you can pass filters into the web part? I don't know exactly when that would land, but that is in our next series of investments there.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions?
Great. We're happy to hang out a little bit afterwards, so thank you so much for coming. Really enjoyed it. Fill out your evaluations.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I can't hear you. Oh yeah, there's a Power BI
Power BI
meetup.
meetup.
Session.
It's in here, right? No, where is it?
What session? Where is it? 222 Power BI meetup. If you want to meet other people who are using.
I will
Power
be
BI.
over there if you want to talk. I don't know if you're.
I will be there as much as I can. I have an airplane flight that I have to get to.
All right.
So
Good deal. All right. Thanks, everyone.
hey, cheers.